He thought his badge would protect him. Until the judge hit play on the bodycam he forgot was still recording. In a single moment, a courtroom full of people who had come to watch what looked like an ordinary misconduct hearing gasped in disbelief. What the video revealed wasn't just the truth about a man in uniform, it was the truth about the system that had shielded him for far too long. Before we go further, make sure you subscribe to True Crime Uncovered. Because stories like this, the stories they don't want you to see, are the ones we dig out of the shadows and bring into the light. The officer at the center of it all had been on the force for almost a decade. On paper, he was decorated, respected, and called a leader among men. But in the community he patrolled, people whispered different stories. Stories of traffic stops that never seemed to end fairly. Stories of threats that didn't feel like warnings but intimidation. Stories of a man who believed his badge gave him the right to say and do whatever he wanted. And for years there had been no proof. Just fear. Just silence. Until one night. That night started like many others. A routine patrol. A minor stop. A man pulled over for a broken taillight. What should have been a quick ticket turned into an hour-long nightmare. The officer didn't know it then, but his body camera was recording. And it captured every word, every slur, every insult, every abuse of power. The defense tried to argue the stop was by the book. They claimed the officer had reason to pull over the driver, reason to escalate, reason to search. But when the judge pressed play, the mask shattered. "Step out of the car," the officer barked on the recording, his voice dripping with authority. But then, just seconds later, came words that made the courtroom fall silent. He mocked the driver's accent. He laughed about the color of his skin. He called him names that had no place in a society that pretends justice is blind. The driver, shaking, could be heard trying to explain, trying to comply, begging not to be treated like a criminal. But the recording revealed a man in uniform who wasn't interested in the truth. He was interested in control. The courtroom wasn't prepared for what came next. The officer bragged on tape. He bragged to another officer arriving on scene, laughing about teaching people like him a lesson. He even admitted on his own camera that the stop wasn't really about the taillight at all. Gasps, hands over mouths. The gallery erupted. And sitting there, the officer who once walked into the courtroom with his head held high suddenly looked very small. But this wasn't just about one man and one stop. This was about a pattern. As the prosecutor laid out, there were complaints on file, dozens of them buried, ignored, dismissed. People had spoken up, but without evidence, it had been their word against his. Until now, the judge leaned forward, watching the officer squirm. The defense tried to object, tried to spin the words, tried to say the tape was out of context. But there was no out of context. The truth was raw. The truth was undeniable. The truth was playing on a screen larger than life, in front of a jury that could barely hide their disgust. Every pause in the tape felt heavier than the last. Every insult was a nail in the coffin of his credibility. And as the jury took notes, the officer's eyes darted around the room, searching for a lifeline. There was none. The victim of that night, the man pulled over for the broken taillight, sat in the courtroom too. For the first time, he wasn't the one being questioned. He wasn't the one being doubted. He wasn't the one on trial. He was the one finally heard. And when he locked eyes with the officer across the courtroom, the power dynamic had flipped completely. The prosecutor's closing argument was simple, but devastating. The badge is supposed to mean protection. But what happens when the badge is used as a weapon? What happens when the people we trust to enforce the law break it themselves? The silence that followed was louder than any words. The jury didn't take long. Their verdict came swift, sharp, and final. Guilty. But even that wasn't the end of the story. Because once the tape was made public, more people came forward. More victims. More recordings. More patterns. The officer who thought he could hide behind his badge had exposed himself with his own arrogance. And the ripple effect shook the entire department. Some officers cut ties with him. Others were investigated. Policies changed. And for once, the community felt like their voices weren't just echoes in the dark. They were finally being heard. The judge's final words still hang heavy. You wore the badge. You carried the weight of trust. And you shattered it with your own words. This court cannot and will not ignore that. He was sentenced, stripped of his badge, stripped of the power he once abused. And as he was led away in cuffs, the same cuffs he had used on so many others, the courtroom erupted once more. Not in gasps this time, but in applause, because justice, though late, had finally spoken. And it all came down to one thing. A body cam he forgot was still recording. That is why we tell these stories. Because no matter how powerful someone thinks they are, the truth has a way of catching up. If you believe justice should always prevail, make sure you hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe to True Crime Uncovered. Because tomorrow's story might be even more shocking than today's.